are different from Homo that's apes. Patterns and ape-like ability the nature of human society. As the Australopithecines may still be considered as apes. As for Lucy's pelvis, many claim it indicates bipedal locomotion, but Johansen and his team report it was badly crushed with distortion and cracking when first discovered. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? These problems led one commentator in the Journal of Human Evolution to propose that Lucy's pelvis is so different from other Australopithecines and so close to the human condition due to error in the reconstruction, creating a very human-like sacral plane. Lacking intermediate. If humans evolved from ape-like creatures, what were the transitional species between the ape-like hominins just discussed and the truly human-like members of the Homo genius found in the fossil record? There aren't any good candidates. The demise of Homo habilis. Jan Tattersall, an anthropologist at the American Museum of Natural History, called it a wastebasket taxon, little more than convenient recipient for a motley assortment of hominin fossils, and believes more than one hominin species is represented. Skipping over a bunch, Homo naledi versus Australopithecus sediba, the link resurrected. And there's a number of paragraphs that I won't read on out of detail. It doesn't come to any particular conclusion. Commenting on Sediba, Harvard's Daniel Lieberman said, the origins of the genus Homo remain as murky as ever. And Donald Johansen remarked, the transition to Homo continues to be almost totally confusing. Even Lee Berger, the discoverer, who has a vested interest in having this thing be a human-ape transition, acknowledged when publishing on Sediba that the ancestry of Homo and its relationship to early Australopithecines remain unresolved. Skipping over some more, Big Bang origin of Homo. After realizing that habilis could not serve as a link between Homo and Australopithecus, two paleoanthropologists lamented this muddle leaves Homo erectus without a clear ancestor, without a past. In other words, the missing link is still missing. Homo erectus appears abruptly without apparent evolutionary precursors. Skip over a bunch. All in the family, in contrast to the Australopithecines, the major members of Homo erectus and the Neanderthals, Homo neanderthalensis, are similar to us. Some paleoanthropologists have even classified erectus and Neanderthalensis as members of our own species, Homo sapiens. Over more, getting to the conclusion. Despite the claims of evolutionary paleoanthropologists and unceasing media hype, the fragmented hominin fossil record does not document the evolution of humans from ape-like precursors. While the hominin fossil record is marked by incomplete and fragmented fossils, known hominins fall into two separate groups, ape-like and human-like, with a distinct gap between them. The genus Homo appears in an abrupt, non-Darwinian fashion without evidence of an evolutionary transition from ape-like hominins. Other members of Homo appear very similar to humans, and their differences amount to small-scale microevolutionary change, providing no evidence that we are related to non-human-like species. But there's no evidence that contradicts an evolutionary model. Many researchers recognize an explosion of modern human-like culture in the archaeological record about 35 to 40,000 years ago, showing the abrupt appearance of human creativity, technology, art, and even paintings, showing the rapid emergence of self-awareness, group identity, and symbolic thought. One reviewer dubbed this the creative explosion. Indeed, a 2014 paper by leading paleoanthropologists admits that we have essentially no explanation of how and why our linguistic computations and representations evolved, since non-human animals provide virtually no relevant parallels to human linguistic communication. This abrupt appearance of modern human mythology, intellect, and culture contradicts evolutionary models and may indicate design events in human history. Of course, there is room for several disagreement among Christians on these questions, but theistic evolutionists who believe that humans evolved from ape-like species should, at the very least, temper their rhetoric in the light of the sparse fossil evidence. They certainly should not demand that the Church accept the evolutionary consensus on human origins. The fossil evidence simply isn't that clear. If anything, the fossil record contradicts the central evolutionary claim that humans evolved from ape-like creatures. After all, as noted, two top paleoanthropologists have admitted that the evolutionary sequence for the majority of hominin lineage is unknown, and that should be referenced. With the fossil evidence for human evolution so weak, why should our theistic evolutionist brothers and sisters insist that the Church must adopt the point? That's how he finishes. Now, I think both Anne Gager and Casey Luskin are on the geological timescale. They do not explicitly reconcile the age of Homo, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 million years, with mitochondrial Eve, which is 200,000 years, and Y chromosome Adam, which is a little bit, although those are statistical and not necessarily mandatory for them to be in that order. But it's interesting that they are. And the emergence of human culture, about 35,000 years in their telling. So this Adam and Eve, 35,000, is it Y chromosome, is it Homo? Or were the pre-Homo sapiens ones not really human? I think Casey Luskin does a creditable job of surveying the ape-to-human transition. It's a little fast. Not as thorough as Reuben Sanford's contested bones, but manages to hit most of the highlights. There are subtle differences in emphasis, and perhaps the most interesting thing is that the chapter, although I didn't read the entire chapter to you, I did read the entire chapter, and Luskin did not mention the footprints in Crete, which had come out by the time this article was written. To repeat, Luskin does not deal with the question of whether Adam and Eve were the first of the genus Homo, or whether they were more recent, and therefore some hominids were not descendants of Adam and Eve. But he does, I think, make a fair case for Homo being distinct from apes. But that's my opinion. Now it's your turn. Yes, Ariel.
Well, this chapter is very interesting, but This has become an old story. What's standing my thinking here is we're talking about so many of these arising 40,000 years ago. What I'd like to be is to put all the carbon-14 dates, assuming that there's some even collection of this, and so on, to see if we find a plateau around 40,000 years. Which would be interesting. We would find a great variety, but 40,000, I can't remember Bob Brown said on that as a plateau or not, but I think we need to work in that area.
Well, if you take the dinosaur data seriously, then it's arguable that there's a plateau around, maybe depends on whether you regard the dinosaurs or they coal as more reliable, at somewhere between, say, 30 to 35,000 years and 40,000 years. So if that's what you're looking for, I guess you could say we might be able to find it. And who knows, we may be able to get some of that published. It'll be interesting to see.
You've got some interesting data here to deal with.
You know, what I see is if you're going to make all of Homo into variants of Homo sapiens, then Adam and Eve need to be 2 million years old, or else you have to question the dating methods.
You don't leave Habilis out of that one.
Well, Habilis wastebasket taxon, most people will say that. But I'm talking about Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalensis, Homo rudolfensis, and there's heidelbergensis, and a few other ones like that. Luskin's not dealing with that very interesting question. Where do you put Adam and Eve? Do you put them 2 million years ago? Do you put them 200,000 years ago, according to the standard interpretation of mitochondria and Y chromosomes? Or put them at 35,000 years ago when this sudden culture thing comes up? And of course, if you question the dating, all three may be related to each other. Of course, it gets more interesting when we have apparent human-like footprints in Crete, supposedly 5.7 million years ago. And if you trust the geologic column, it's pretty secure.
You also try 6,000 according to the Bible.
Well, if it turned out to be 20,000, I think one could adjust to that more easily from a short chronology than from a long chronology. But I agree that I think that somewhere between 6 and 7.5 is more likely to turn out to be correct.
So how are they coming up with that figure?
The 35 to 40,000? Well, that is where you start seeing cave paintings and
based on a dating thing or layering generation or some generations. And I was talking to Larry Gary about this. I mean, we just did this Israel and Egypt trip, and
does he want to put it out?
I asked him. He said, put all the archaeology together. What's the longest? He would say, he said about 15,000. Maybe about 10. Even with
and of course that would make the choice of those even wider. And of course, when you realize that, at least for mitochondrial Eve, there's some good evidence that human and other animal, by the way, mitochondria mutate much more rapidly than they thought it would. Suddenly brings that down to, according to, I think it's Nature, 6,500 years. And of course, that's a range at between 4,000 and 8,000 years. And they are trying to say, but nobody believes that.
So I guess I still don't see the essential why we have to put it into a 6,000s thing. So I mean, the genealogies don't agree. There's parts left out in each list, and we don't know for sure about the words for sons and grandsons, and so I guess what's the driving force to fit this into 6 versus 10, 15, whatever?
Well, part of the driving force is that if you do take those as father-son relationships, it does come out to pretty close to 6,000.
That's based on certain assumptions, too.
That is based on assumptions.
And so which genealogy? You're choosing incomplete genealogy.
Around 6,000 years tempted people to say, well, it was exactly 6,000 years. So...
based on
Actually, Lightfoot went on to say that it was 4,004 BC was creation, and in fact is October something at 9 o'clock in the morning, which seems to me to be a little reach. If I were trying to make sense of all of that, I would say that the indication for it, less than 15,000 years, is a lot stronger than the evidence for it being, let's say, 6,000. And until we have something that would fit everything in, I'm not sure that I would say 6,000 exactly. Although, if you wanted me to lay my bets, kind of like we do in the emergency department with somebody coming in who's drunk, looks to me like, about a 0.32. Nah, it's 0.28. We're just laying our bets and where it's going to wind up.
The essential part to me would be the intelligence, a creator. So to me, it's right. He can do it however he wants. It doesn't really matter. Even if you're going to say age, that could be a 20,000, 50,000 time frame in relation to ages, and you still haven't given or surrendered any essential ingredient to me. So that's why I guess when I'm educated, what would be the essential ingredient we're sacrificing to acknowledge a longer time frame?
If you were asking me to lay my bet down, where I'm going to put it, I would say creation about 3,985 or something like that. But that's.
So
there are multiple assumptions that would go into that, and the discussion of how that would work I would not want to be stuck on that as the absolute. That is just where I would put it. But as my best guess in knowing that there's a huge range all the way from somewhat under 4,000 BC to probably 13,000 BC or something like that.
How much?
13,000.
Okay. I'm okay with the problem-solving attempt in the front of trying to establish something, as precise as we're able to. But I guess I want to know is it's like, if we did accept a little bit longer, are we running into a problem with something else? So are we trying to fit multiple problems together? And so if we go longer than 6,000, then we're bumping up against some other revealed thing. Then that's kind of what I'm searching for.
The way I view Ellen White in this regard is that she just simply took the numbers that were in her Bible and they were correct. And I don't see any place where she says God showed me it was 6,000 years ago. At which point it would be a whole lot harder for me.
It would be a different discussion.
Yeah.
So sort of like the number of rooms in the Paradise Sanitarium or something. She said, well, it wasn't an issue that I had to invoke some inspirational.
They didn't argue because there wasn't any obvious reason to. And I think that if it turns 7,500 actually fits a whole bunch of stuff together, then I think we should go with 7,500. I don't see that it makes a huge difference. However, if you don't have an Adam and Eve, it does make a huge difference, and that's one of the things we'll come to when we go to the theological stuff. And like I say, once we start doing that, it really starts pushing you towards a short-age creationistic point of view.
You do methodology stuff, also nice form stuff.
There's a whole bunch of stuff you got to deal with there.
How credible is the evidence for having originated from a population of thousands of somewhat similar organisms?
You're about 2 chapters too early. We'll get to that.
Well, the question's pretty relevant to the discussion.
No, it is relevant to the discussion. I agree with you. I'm just saying it's going to take a whole 40 minutes to set that discussion up. And I don't just
like mitochondrial DNA or something like that.
It has to do with mitochondrial DNA. It also has to do with haplotypes. And I really
which haplotypes?
And I really think the haplotypes are the place where they're getting more pressure. And I'll tell you why. Mitochondrial DNA, as I said before, pushes us to 200,000 years. That's down from where they expected it to be. They thought it would be millions of years. And furthermore, if you revise it by experimental rates of the mitochondrial mutation, it pushes you to about 6,500. And again, those things are probably having plus or minus 95% confidence limits of about a factor of 2. So it's 4 to 8. So but it's certainly within the 6,000 range, and certainly 7,500 would still be in the range. But if you're going with the mitochondrial data, we're actually being pushed in that direction. Now, it'll be interesting to see what happens with the data from male chromosomes. The Y chromosome, because it turns out that the Y chromosome, as I think will be mentioned next week, is actually less variable than most of the other. It's less variable even than 25% of the variation on the other chromosomes, which is what we kind of expect. Y chromosomes don't mutate very much, which is amazing considering that human and chimpanzee Y chromosomes are wildly different. Like 30% brand new material, and the material they do have is totally mixed up. We've been through that before, but maybe another time we should bring up that stuff, because we now have gorilla. And the gorilla is actually much closer to humans than chimpanzees are in the Y chromosome, which is a little surprising. Now, by much, I mean instead of 30% new material, they have 15% new material, so it's still wild. When you think that we're supposed to be 97 or 98 or 99, depending on who's counting, percent chimp, and it's like 30% brand new material, I think that when they did the chimpanzee-human thing, they said that the Y chromosome is different in chimpanzees and humans, as the autosomes are between chickens and humans. That's an actual quote from the or a very, very close phrase from the article. I'm trying to think of the author's name. David Page was the last author. He probably knows more about this than anybody else. And it was, I think, in Nature. And if you're interested in that, Google human and chimpanzee Y chromosomes are horrendously different. And I put my name with it, and there's a presentation that I did that has all of the references in it, so you can look them up. And most of them, although it was a year or two ago, so I'm not sure how many of them are still active, but you can get them if you go to Google Scholar. You can find if they don't come up on the website address, you can